Hello, 8th graders. This is lesson 4.5a, multiplying rational numbers, and I think you'll probably find that this goes a little easier than adding and subtracting rational numbers. The key thing to remember is that when you multiply fractions, you have a fraction a over b times a fraction c over d. You are going to multiply the numerators together. That's how we get the ac. Then we multiply the denominators together. That's how we get the BD. If we look at example A, we are going to take negative 5 times 7, which is negative 35, and then 8 times 15, which is 120. Now, answers always have to be left in lowest terms, so at this point we have a bit of a reducing problem to do. We know that 35 ends in a 5 and 120 ends in a 0, so that means I can divide both of them by 5. I will get negative 7 over 24. And at this point, we are in lowest terms. Now you'll notice the other thing you got to be careful for is to take that negative number. You're taking a negative times a positive, so my answer has to be negative. Now, the negative 35 over 120, that gets to be a bit sticky to reduce for a lot of people. Those are fairly large numbers. If you recall, in the past, we have taught you that there is a little bit of a shortcut to that. If we start with our negative 5a times 7 over 15, we look for what we call diagonal reducing. We look to see if I can reduce 5 and 15, and I can. I can reduce it by 5. Negative 5 divided by a 5 is negative 1, and 15 divided by 5 is 3. Then I look at the 7 and the 8. No, I cannot do any type of reduction there. Now I'm down to negative 1 times 7, which is negative 7, and 8 times 3, which is 24. Let's look at example B. And actually, what you should do is hit pause and do it, and then I'll go through it. First of all, I am going to look for diagonal reducing, and I can reduce the 4 and the 8. 4 divided by 4 is 1, 8 divided by 4 is 2. Then I have to pay attention to the fact that it's negative times negative. I have negative 1 times negative 3, which is positive 3, and 5 times 2 is 10. What happens if I have mixed numbers? If you recall, that means I have to change them to improper fractions. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So 2 and 1/4 equals negative 9/4. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 3 is 18. So that is negative 18 over 5. Now I look for reducing, and I can take 2 out of both the 4 and the 18. Now this just goes to show you, you aren't necessarily always going to be able to take the one number into the other evenly, but you can work with common factors. I now have negative 9 times negative 9, which is an 81, and 2 times 5 is 10, and I will get 8 and 1/10. I can square rational numbers. It just means that I'm multiplying the number by itself. And if I change it to the improper fraction of 3 over 2 times 3 over 2, the only thing is here I have no reducing, so I have 9 over 4, which equals 2 and 1/4 when I reduce to lowest terms. What happens if I have 3 numbers? To be honest with you, you can reduce across these numbers. Now, the 5s and the 5s are each going to become 1s. The 6 will become a 2, and the 3 will become a 1. Now, I just multiply the 3 numbers across the top. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 times 4 is going to give me 8. They will mix the functions. Here, you are going to first add, because that's what's in parentheses. Now, what I do is change the whole numbers to 3 over 1, or to 4 over 1, or 6 over 1, whatever that whole number is. Now, I get that common denominator, which in this case is going to be 6. So I'll have 3 over 6 plus 4 over 6. Oops. Now, that means I'm going to have 3 over 1 times 7 over 6. Remember that when you add fractions, you do not add the denominators at all. You only add the numerators. But you have to have the common denominator. Now I can actually do some reducing. 1 and 2. 1 times 7 is 7. 1 times 2 is 2. And when I reduce, I get the improper, or I get the mixed number of 3.5. Yes, I can do equations. This should ring a bell. Multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient. That is a key point in math. I stressed it a lot last year, stressing it again this year. If I look at my equation in H, it's really a simple multiplication equation. Don't forget the negative sign. Some of you are in bad habits of dropping that negative sign, but it's got to go with you. The coefficient here is negative 7 over 8, so I have to multiply both sides by negative 8 over 7. Again, change the 14 over 1 to 14 over 1 rather, and then I'm going to go negative 8 over 7. Okay, now on the left side, negative times negative becomes positive. 8s cancel to 1s, 7s cancels to 1. I am down to a coefficient of positive 1, which is exactly what I want. On the right side, I look to see if I can do any reducing, and I can. The 7 and the 14. Notice that what I really have here is positive 2 times negative 8. So my answer is going to be negative 16. You go ahead and try I. First of all, you got to remember to change these to their improper fractions of 5 over 2, and then you can multiply by that reciprocal of the coefficient. The 2's will reduce. 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 times 5 is 5. And this is a negative. Whoops, I forgot to carry the negative. This one is a two-step equation. If you remember, we first have to deal with the addition and the subtraction. So negative 2/3 d minus 1 plus 1 is going to be 2/5 plus 1. When I simplify, on the left side I will have negative 2/3 d. 2/5 plus 1 is 1 and 2/5. But you need to change that to the improper fraction of 7 over 5. And then what I do is I usually X it off so I don't get confused. If you don't need to do that, fine, you don't need to do that. Now, multiply by negative 3 over 2. And on the left side, I will be down to d. On the right side, I have no real nice reduction at all. 2 doesn't go into 7, 3 and 5 don't reduce. 7 times negative 3 is negative 21. 2 times 5 is 10. And I can reduce that to negative 2 and 1/10 as a mixed number. Okay, I would challenge you to hit pause, and then I'll do K. First of all, I need to deal with the addition by subtracting. So I'm going to subtract the 2 from both sides. I will have 1/3 W. Now, folks, don't get too rattled here, but if I have 3.5, I'm going to take away 2. I don't have anything to subtract the fraction, subtract from the fraction, so that's there as a 1/2, and 3 minus 2 is 1. Now, I change that to the improper fraction, and I don't know if you want to cross it off this way or whatever, I do it so I don't get confused that I don't need it anymore. Now I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient, which in this case is 3 over 1, and W will equal 9 over 2, which is 4 1/2. And that concludes lesson 4-5A. Scouting out.